Death penalty for picking up stones. The public is calling on the UK authorities to secure the release of a Briton accused of smuggling artifacts in Iraq. Jim Fitton, 66, is currently in Iraqi custody, where he has spent 5 weeks awaiting sentencing on charges of deliberately trying to smuggle antiques out of the country. Under Iraqi law, he faces the death penalty. Arab News, citing Fitton's family, reported that the man worked as a geologist in Malaysia before retiring, and during a trip to Iraq on an archaeological tour, he visited the ancient site of Eridu and picked up stones from the ground. British MP Vera Hobhouse expressed concern in the House of Commons over the Fitton case. Asia and the Middle East Affairs Minister Amanda Milling has expressed concern to the Iraqi authorities about the possible imposition of a death sentence on a Briton. The man's defense, in turn, takes the position of clearly no criminal intent in Fitton, who was the victim of poor organization of the tour and circumstances. An online petition launched by Fitton's family demanding his release has garnered almost 100,000 signatures since it was launched on April 28. Child sacrifice at Carthage. The fact that the Carthaginians are so merciless that they ritually sacrifice their children to the gods was told by the Roman historian Diodorus. He claimed that in the city of Carthage there was a bronze statue of Cronus with arms outstretched palm up. All the children inside rolled into the fiery pit. The historian even mentioned rich families who bought children from the poor and raised them specifically for sacrifice. For thousands of years, this practice was considered so abhorrent that the Romans and Greeks dismissed it as propaganda. But then archaeologists found evidence in cemeteries called tophites. The tophites contained tiny cremated human bones packed in urns and buried under tombstones with inscriptions that thank the gods. Some archaeologists argue that these were not child victims, but beloved children who died at birth. The inscriptions on the tombstones ask the gods to hear my voice and bless me. Some of the urns contain the remains of animals that were definitely sacrificed and buried in the same way as children. The skeletons discovered were too few to represent all the stillbirths and infant death that took place in a city the size of a Carthage 2,000 years ago. Inside an Egyptian hawk mummy. American explorers studied the mummy of a bird, which was considered the remains of a hawk. It turned out that under the cocoon are the remains of a sacred ibis, which even partially preserved soft tissues and feathers. According to scientists, this find, which was kept in an educational institution for a long time, is about 1,500–2,000 years old. Interest in ancient Egyptian animal mummies has increased in recent years. Moreover, it became possible to make three-dimensional reconstructions of their internal structure without violating their integrity using X-ray computed tomography. Human mummies are also actively studied by this method. For example, recently, Egyptologists for the first time examined the mummy of Amenhotep I and found out that its remains were badly damaged by tomb robbers and also enlightened two ancient Egyptian mummies from the Valley of the Kings. Graduate student Carol Ann Barsity of Cornell University examined a supposed bird mummy that was in her school's collection labeled as a hawk mummy. The exact origin of this artifact remains unknown, as there is no record of its arrival at the university. As a result of the study, they discovered that under the cocoon there are indeed the remains of a bird, which even has preserved some soft tissues and feathers. It turned out that one of the legs of this bird was broken even before it was mummified. In addition, after death, possibly during transportation, its beak was broken. The weight of the mummy turned out to be 942 grams, and its age, according to researchers, is about 1,500–2,000 years. Perhaps, if in the future it is possible to extract DNA from the soft tissues of the sacred ibis, then scientists will be able to determine the place where it comes from. Daggers made from people. Until the end of the last century, warriors from New Guinea used bone daggers in hand-to-hand combat. They were often made from the thigh bones of large flightless birds called cassowaries, but there were some that were rarer and highly prized. They were made from human bones. This revered weapon was made from the remains of people of high status. They were usually the fathers of warriors who apparently donated their bones willingly. Daggers were worn prominently on the biceps, and those stones made from human remains were much more elaborate and ornate. This gave them more of a ceremonial status than a practical one. Anthropologists wanted to know which type of weapon was actually the best. They tested 11 daggers, 6 from cassowaries, 5 from humans, and found that the blades made from human remains retained more of the natural curvature of the bone and were stronger. Cavemen watched cartoons. A new multidisciplinary study of 50 ancient Roman stones shows that our distant ancestors could create animation. They achieved the desired effect with the help of fire. For analysis, stones were selected that were found on the territory of France but are now stored in the funds of the British Museum. They are known as plaquettes. These stones are covered with ancient images, mostly figures of people and animals, as well as strange lines. A new study has shown that these drawings were carved on rocks between 14,000 and 23,000 years ago. It is known that they bear traces of thermal damage. According to the authors of the study, such traces could leave a fire from the hearth. The stones were not directly fired, but the nature of the traces indicates that they were located close to the fire for some time. This suggested that the cavemen deliberately set such stones around the fire. They did this with a simple purpose. The flickering of fire seemed to make the figures carved on the stones move and distort, which created a kind of animation effect. In other words, the cavemen were, in fact, watching the first cartoons in history. Scientists tested their hypothesis experimentally. For this, 3D modeling was used. In virtual reality, the plaques have been recreated in great detail. Modeling helped to look at the engravings as prehistoric artists might have seen them. It turned out that if the stones are placed close to the fire, the flickering of the fire can cause an animation effect. Coprolite Lloyd's Bank. Not all gruesome archaeological discoveries point to our murderous past. Some artifacts may be shocking for entirely different reasons. For example, the Lloyd's Bank coprolite may be the largest piece of fossilized human feces in history. It was found in 1972 during excavations that were to become a branch of Lloyd's Bank in York, England. This find, 7 inches long and 2 inches in diameter, dates back to the 9th century AD. It is believed to have been produced by a Viking who lived in the settlement then known as Jorvik. Microscopic analysis of fossilized feces revealed traces of pollen grains and cereal bran. This indicated that its creator, let's call him that, was on a diet of compound bread. The coprolite still contained parasite eggs, which showed that the person had been infected with whipworm and human roundworm, a dangerous parasitic worm that can penetrate tissues and exit through all human orifices, including the corners of the eyes. They may not be pretty, but coprolites can provide us with information about the health and diet of the average person from past eras that you could never get from books or scrolls. Archaeologists who specialize in this kind of research are called paleoscatologists, and those who have studied Lloyd's Bank coprolite consider it as valuable as the crown jewels. Treasures of the Roman Witch. An absolutely extraordinary find made in Pompeii. In one of the relatively recently excavated houses of the Roman nobility, a treasure was found with many valuable things, but their physical value is not too great. Beads, a figurine in the form of a penis, 2 mirrors, a necklace, decorative elements made of glazed ceramics, bone and amber, an amethyst carved female figure. However, the person who hid it took care of the safety of the treasure. It was clearly extremely dear to him. Historians suggest that we have a set of sorcerers, and she apparently was a servant or slave. Most likely, the woman hunted with rituals designed to increase fertility and could also send spells. The fact that all these things belong to a poor woman is especially pleasing to archaeologists. They do not often manage to look into the world of ordinary people, but most of the work in connection with this treasure, of course, will be the work of specialists in the religion of ancient Rome. They too are not often lucky enough to learn the unofficial underground aspects of an ancient cult. Luniano Vampire Child. A few years ago, American and Italian archaeologists worked side by side excavating a cemetery in Umbria. The burial place was known as La Necropoli dei Bambini, or the Children's Cemetery. Understandably, the work was quite unnerving, but the researchers made a particularly disturbing discovery. They found the skeleton of a child with a rock in its mouth in a rare and macabre example of a vampire burial. The child was about 10 years old, of indeterminate sex, and died 1,500 years ago. He was lying on his left side with limestone the size of a large axe stuck in his jaw. Salmon had been smeared on both sides of the stone, which still had visible teeth marks. Archaeologists believe that this ritual was performed in such a way that the child would not rise from the dead and spread malaria. The locals called the unfortunate child the Vampire of Legnano. Unique icon for 24 million euros. You can find an artifact not only by digging into ancient graves and lost cities, but also right in your kitchen. An elderly resident of the French city of Compiègne decided to find out how much her old smoked icon that hung over her stove could cost. The woman did not know either the exact name of the painting or its approximate age. It turned out that this is the Mockery of Jesus, the most valuable icon of the 13th century, painted by the Florentine painter Cimabue. It was possible to prove this thanks to the method of infrared photography. As a result, this picture went at auction for 24 million. The reason for this cost is the uniqueness of the work. It was made at the turn of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and is a magnificent example of Proto-Renaissance art, which combined the features of two eras and at that time, one might say, very experimental. Neanderthals and cannibalism. Evidence found in several places indicates that Neanderthals not only practiced cannibalism but also made tools from bones. A few years ago, archaeologists discovered 40,000-year-old Neanderthal skeletons in the Goya caves in Belgium. There were cuts, pits, and incisions on their bones, all signs that they had been killed. In addition, the bodies were also skinned and cut, and the bone marrow removed. All this suggests that people became victims of cannibalism by other Neanderthals. Other food sources found in the same caves, such as deer and horses, were prepared in the same way. In addition, the femurs and lower legs were used as striking tools. Back in the 1990s, researchers discovered the remains of 6 Neanderthals, including 2 children, in the Mula-Gursi cave in France. They had the same markings as the others, but they also had Neanderthal chewed finger bones. The teenager found the Count's family treasure. A 14-year-old Polish boy named Patrick accidentally discovered Count family documents and valuables hidden in the ground in the forest. The things belonged to one of the most influential Prussian families, the Finkensteins, who owned the estate in Jablavki. For more than 70 years, they found items have lain in the ground in tin cans. Several dozen personal documents and other items were found to be in excellent condition. The main part of recovered items belonged to Count Hans von Finkenstein, who owned the estate until 1945. Personal documents, a diary from the First World War, as well as the Count's will with the family coat of arms and lacquer seal. Among other things, personal belongings of the Count were found: military uniform and orders, hunting equipment, personal wardrobe items, glasses, pocket watches, jewelry, silverware, as well as postcards, letters, and family photos in albums. The boy's parents immediately reported the find to the local authorities, who handed it over to the Cultural Heritage Protection Service, after which the valuables were transported to the Historical and Archaeological Museum in Elbląg. Information about the treasure was published in 2018, although the discovery itself took place a year earlier. It took time to take inventory and conduct certain studies at the place where the finds were found. The largest rock paintings in North America. In 1998, in Alabama, archaeologists found a cave in which they found several fragments of pottery, as well as pieces of coal suitable for radiocarbon dating. The pottery turned out to be similar to samples from the woodland period, from about 1000 BC to 1000 AD. A group of scientists led by Jan Simek from the University of Tennessee carried out a work to study the ceiling of this cave. I must say it is very low, from 60 centimeters to 1.25 meters. Cave 19 itself in Alabama is huge. It has both vertical shafts characteristic of karst caves and low ceiling chambers formed by washouts. On the ceiling of just such a chamber, with an area of 20 by 25 meters, scientists have identified the largest North American rock paintings known today. Until now, they have not been paid attention to because they are difficult to see. For this, you need to lie on the floor. Simek, on the other hand, applied the method of photogrammetry, which has long been known and widely used for applied purposes, but not in archaeology. The special microclimate of the cave not only provided a canvas for the rock paintings, but also preserved them. The clay layer was preserved by oxidation caused by moisture condensation. What did the inhabitants of pre-Columbian America draw? People and animals. So, on the ceiling, the image of a rattlesnake about 3 meters long is quite distinguishable. It is believed that it was a sacred animal among a number of indigenous people of the southeast of the modern United States. Scientists have described the 5 largest drawings. In addition to the rattlesnake, there were human figures and an intricate pattern on the ceiling. 2 of the anthropomorphic figures are slightly longer than 1.8 meters, another is slightly longer than 90 centimeters. These people apparently are dressed in ceremonial clothes and perform some kind of rituals. The researchers suggested that some of the anthropomorphic figures depict not people but ghosts, and the whole complex of drawings is dedicated to the world of spirits. It is not yet possible to test this hypothesis. Colored frescoes found in Khnum Temple. In the Temple of Khnum at Izna, German and Egyptian researchers discovered brightly colored ceiling frescoes. The relief images in the central part of the ceiling, according to the German Egyptologist Christian Leitz of the University of Tübingen, amount to a total of 46 images, including the Upper Egyptian vulture goddess Nekhbet and the Lower Egyptian snake goddess Wadjet. While Nekhbet, depicted with the hand of a vulture, wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, Wadjet can be identified by a Lower Egyptian crown surmounted by a cobra. Since 2018, specialists have been exploring bas-reliefs, paintings, and inscriptions in the temple. Work was underway to clean over half of the ceilings and 8 of the 18 columns. Moreover, 2 plaque bands were cleared of soot. Temples and ancient images of the gods were often painted with bright colors, but they usually faded or even completely disappeared as a result of external influences. Skeletons on chairs. The Colorado River, or rather the bay at the Cienega Prince Pier, is an amazingly beautiful place with clear water. Divers love to swim there, and on May 4, 2015, one of them, in the process of enjoying underwater beauties, stumbled upon something interesting. 2 human skeletons sat on plastic chairs as if they were going to rest and chat about something. The terrified diver flew out of the water and immediately called the police. The divers who went under the water took several pictures, and these shots are reminiscent of a horror movie where people died of horror sitting on chairs. The skulls even have sunglasses on them, but the sheriff suspected that it was just an installation, and the diver, who again went to examine the terrible find, confirmed that the skeletons were not real. High-quality copies of human skeletons which were made of sinking plastic. On one of them was a note: "Bernie dreamed all his life to live in the river." The police spent about an hour examining the photographs and skeletons before being convinced that it was someone's joke, which, by the way, is well implemented. Cave of King Herod the Great. An international team of archaeologists conducted a comparative analysis of alabaster, the components for the manufacture of which were mined in ancient times in the Levant and Egypt. As a result, a cave was found in which raw materials were mined for the manufacture of the famous luxurious bath of King Herod the Great. Until now, it was believed that ancient Egypt was the main supplier of calcite for the manufacture of luxurious alabaster products, including for the rulers and aristocrats who lived on the territory of modern Israel. A striking example of such luxury items are two baths of the famous biblical king Herod the Great, found in the fortress of Kypros and his royal palace located south of Jerusalem. They are kept in museum funds in Austria. These bathtubs are made from finely worked calcite alabaster. The fact that both bathtubs were clearly made in Israel and not in Egypt, as one might expect due to the high quality of the stone, came as a special surprise. This means that Herod the Great used local products, and the production of alabaster in Judea in the second half of the 1st century BC was sufficiently developed and of high enough quality to satisfy the luxurious standards of Herod, one of the best builders among the kings of that period. Ancient hand grenades. These artifacts were found in the last century in Jerusalem. A new analysis of ceramic pots from the 11th–12th century Jerusalem has confirmed previous suggestions that some of these vessels may have been used as ancient hand grenades during the Crusades. Spheroconic archaeological artifacts rounded with a cone-shaped base are found in museums around the world. Their versatility and varied uses are well documented. In a new study, scientists have found evidence that these pots were also used as hand grenades. The researchers drew attention to 4 shards of pots found in the Armenian garden in the walled Old City of Jerusalem. They were discovered between 1961 and 1967. These artifacts are kept at the Royal Ontario Museum. Experts examined the remains inside them and found that one vessel contained explosive material. Through various chemical tests, the researchers found that the other 3 vessels most likely contained oils, aromatics, and medicines. The 4th vessel, a clay pot with very thick walls and no decorations, contained remains that indicated the possibility of storing chemicals or chemical explosives. Sulfur was one of the ingredients found, and traces of mercury and magnesium were also found. All of these were found in higher quantities than in other pots in the surrounding soil. This is further evidence for historians who want to understand how wars were thousands of years ago. However, it remains unclear what exactly the mixture was inside these hand grenades. Researchers do not exclude that this is a mixture known as Greek fire. However, its composition remains a mystery. Opinions differ about the ingredients, and the preparation process has never been documented. Ancient Roman pottery in Egypt. Archaeologists have discovered an ancient pottery workshop in Alexandria dating back to the beginning of the Roman period. Many fragments of round vessels, coins, figurines, and even a ritual room were found in it. Ancient workers primarily used the site to make amphoras, 2-handled, narrow-necked vessels that were commonly used to store and transport goods, such as oil and grain, according to researchers at Oxford University's Classical Art Research Center. 2 workshops with kilns were carved into the rock. One of them is still in excellent condition. In the Byzantine era, long after the production of pottery ceased here, the buildings were probably used for a different purpose, the production of lime. Among the finds was a pantry where kitchen utensils and crockery were stored. A number of limestone structures were most likely used as temporary housing for workers on the site. One room with a raised platform and remains of terracotta statues was probably used for rituals. Some of these statues represent the god Harpocrates. He took the place of the Egyptian god Horus in the Alexandrian triad of the gods, which also included Isis and Osiris. Egypt came under Roman rule in 30 BC after the death of Queen Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony. After the conquest, Egypt became a prosperous Roman province that supplied the rest of the Roman Empire with a variety of goods, including pottery. 3 bronze swords in a pile of bones. Greek and Italian archaeologists have discovered several Mycenaean tombs in a necropolis near the modern city of Ion. This place is identified with the ancient city of Ripa, whose natives participated in the Greek colonization and found Croton in Magna Graecia. The message was published on the website of the Ministry of Culture and Tourism of Greece. Despite the proximity to the ancient Greek cities of the Achaean Union, the necropolis belongs to an earlier Mycenaean settlement, which has not yet been properly excavated. This year, archaeologists discovered a large rectangular hall with a hearth in the center. The so-called miggeron was ceramics typical of the 17th century BC. A remarkable find was made in tomb number 8. In the bone heaps of old burials of the 14th and 12th centuries BC, 3 bronze swords were found, 2 of which retained parts of wooden hilts. Presumably, the swords were made in the palace workshop, possibly in Mycenae. Experts classified them as types D, mid-15th century BC, and E, mid-13th century BC, according to the Sanders classification. This is a classification of Greek bronze swords developed by the British archaeologist Nancy Sanders. The presence of such expensive things in the necropolis near Aegean should not be surprising. According to the ancient Greek historian Pausanias, it was in Aegean that Agamemnon gathered the most important and powerful leaders in Hellas in order to jointly consult on how they should march on the kingdom of Priam. In addition to weapons, a clay figurine of a horse, glass beads, and carnelian were found in the grave goods of the shifted burials. Clay plate with Homer's Odyssey. Archaeologists working in ancient Olympia, Western Peloponnese, discovered during excavations a clay tile with 13 verses from Homer's Odyssey. The tablet was created in the Roman era, according to preliminary estimates, no later than the 3rd century AD. This is the oldest fragment of the poem found on the territory of the Republic. According to representatives of the Greek Ministry of Culture, the inscription, despite its brevity, is of great archaeological and epigraphic significance. The fragment of the Odyssey found in Olympia has already been read. This is an episode from the 14th Son, one of the conversations of Odysseus, the king of the island of Ithaca, with the swineherd Eumaeus. The entire 14th canto of the poem is dedicated to the stay of the unrecognized Odysseus in the house of his faithful servant, who tells about the events that took place on the island during the 20 years that the hero spent in the Trojan War and wanderings. The epic poem about the return of Odysseus, one of the main heroes of the Greek war against the Trojans, was written around the 8th-7th centuries BC. Consisting of more than 12,000 lines, the Odyssey, along with another Homeric poem, the Iliad, became one of the most important literary achievements of antiquity. Already in the 3rd century BC, Lassius Livius Andronicus translated the poem into Latin. Gift to the Inca gods. In Lake Titicaca, archaeologist divers found a box made of volcanic rocks. When they opened the box, they found a llama carved from the shell of a spiny spondylus clam and a small gold leaf that may have been part of a bracelet. Archaeologists suggest that the finds are offerings from the Incas who wanted to propitiate their gods. The box of gifts was immersed in the lake at least 500 years ago. Archaeologists believe that the box was not there by chance. Reef Kake is located north of Ko. This indicates a spatial relationship between the two sites. Lake Titicaca is one of the popular archaeological sites. Last year, archaeologists found evidence of ritual offerings to unknown deities near the Isle of the Sun by the people of Tiwanaku. They were the most powerful tribe of the Andean mountain range until the arrival of the Incas around the 12th century AD. At the bottom of the lake, researchers found sacrificed llamas, gold and stone jewelry, and ceramic incense burners. These artifacts date back to between 500 and 1100 AD, about 500 years before the Incas came to Lake Titicaca. The most ancient tanners. While sorting through some 12,000 bone fragments recovered from the smuggler's cave off the Atlantic coast of Morocco, archaeologists noticed that some of them were smooth and shiny, as if they were specially shaped by human hands. As a result of additional research, scientists found that 62 found fragments are bone tools, which are from 120,000 to 90,000 years old. Among them are several tools made from animal ribs, which are well known for their use as spatulas, for dressing fur and leather. In the same cave, bones of predators were found, on which there were traces of indicating the removal of the skin. Together, carnivore bones and bone tools represent the earliest known evidence of human clothing making. Secrets of the Vatican. According to archaeological research, the obelisk, which is located in St. Peter's Square, was made in Heliopolis, ancient Egypt, but it is not known during the time of which pharaoh. Then began its movement according to the tastes and whims of the Roman emperors. Octavian Augustus first transported it to Alexandria, Egypt, in 30 BC, and then ordered it to be sent by ship to Rome by Caligula. In order not to break during transportation, the obelisk was loaded onto a ship along with 1,000 tons of lentils. Having completed its task, the ship was covered with volcanic ash and sank near today's Ostia, becoming the base of the pier. The obelisk remained in place for more than 1,500 years, until 1586 Pope Sixtus V decided to move it a few hundred meters to the side, in the center of the square in front of the newly built basilica. The Pope planned to restore all the obelisks that were then in Rome. To prevent the obelisk from becoming a place of idolatry, the Pope performed a ritual of exorcism and then ordered a cross to be erected. It is interesting that the text of the exorcism can still be seen. It is engraved in Latin on the western and eastern parts of the obelisk. It is interesting that ordinary euros are used as a means of payment in this country. But besides this, the Vatican also issues its own coins, which used to depict a portrait of the ruling pontiff, and now the coat of arms of the Pope. Commemorative coins are also minted, and money is sold, being a significant source of income for the country. In addition to its own mint, which of course is open only to the elite, a huge collection of old and rare coins can be found in the Münzcabinet at the Vatican Library. The funds of this museum have only officially 300,000 different coins and medals, and how many are hidden in the caches, it's impossible to count. After all, the possibilities of the Catholic Church were endless, especially during the period of wars and the great geographical discoveries. Many wealthy Christians donated their wealth to the benefit of the Church, yes, and the pontiffs themselves bought valuable artifacts. So, Pope Benedict IV made a huge contribution to the collection of coins. By his order, a collection of Greek and Roman coins belonging to Cardinal Alessandro Albani was purchased, so the history of the current civilization can be easily traced through these really old coins. This is a collector's dream come true. In the Vatican, archaeologists have discovered hundreds of well-preserved graves in a Roman necropolis dating from the reign of the ancient Roman emperors Nero and Gaius Julius Caesar. The search engines found about 250 funerary altars, including headstones on the graves of the Roman elite and freed slaves. The excavations have provided unexpected insights into Roman life at the time, such as the transition of people from the lower classes to the higher social strata, as well as changes in burial practices and the transformation of beliefs. The Roman necropolis is located on the hill of the Vatican along the ancient Triumphal Way. Archaeologists have explored only a small part of the territory, about 1,000 square meters. Tombs with human remains date back to the first 4 centuries AD and include many tombstones, funerary portraits, and sculpted sarcophaguses with the names of the buried. They burn her down, but not to the ground. In what a desperate situation was the French heir Charles if he appointed a 17-year-old girl from the peasants as the commander-in-chief of his troops, and how the world was shocked by the miracles that followed if for almost 6 centuries people have kept evidence of Jeanne's life: her ring, her home, her helmet, and her letters. This ring apparently was with Jeanne almost all her life. Maybe it's a gift from parents. The ring is cheap, it is not an ornament, but an object of personal piety. The letters I and M are made in yellow on the top face, and the inscriptions IHS and MAR on the 2 sides, in both cases meaning Jesus Christ and Mary. The ring was made in the 15th century. Such was in fashion for a short time, and only in the area where Jeanne grew up. Jeanne's critics have cited and continued to refer to the fact that Jeanne was very cruel and repeatedly hit her enemies with a wonderful sword. However, she didn't actually kill people at all. Despite the fact that Jeanne had a sword, with which she is depicted in some paintings, she often used her flag in battle. On May 29, 1431, the tribunal declared Jeanne d'Arc guilty of heresy. On the morning of May 30s, she was taken to the marketplace in Rouen and burned at the stake, in front of an estimated crowd of 10,000 people. She was 19 years old. One legend surrounding the event tells how her heart survived the fire without being harmed. Her ashes were collected and scattered in the Seine. Jeanne d'Arc is one of the most mysterious characters of the Middle Ages. First Aid Kit, which is 2,100 years old. What to hide? The medicine of past centuries, in comparison with the present, looks at least barbaric. The art of healing was quite limited: leeches, incense, bloodletting, and spells. But recently, something was found on the seabed that revealed the medical secret of those years. A 2,100-year-old shipwreck has been found off the coast of Tuscany. The researchers found there the remains of a fairly large first aid kit, whose age is estimated at about 130 BC. It contained 136 pewter and wooden medicine bottles, as well as cubes and pills. Interestingly, most drugs have a diverse and complex composition. Some pills contain more than 10 different plant extracts. Some were made from pine resin, zinc, starch, and even vegetables. Scientists involved physicians in their work, and they concluded that these drugs are still used today in the treatment of certain diseases, for example, of an ophthalmic nature and the gastrointestinal tract. This discovery allows you to find out the secrets of what a wide range of drugs were used by people before our era, and surprisingly, were quite working. Ancient Roman bridges in the middle of the Russian steppe. The Stavropol-Armavir-Tuapse railway has long been dismantled in some sections, but its bridges are still standing. In appearance, they look like ancient Roman buildings. They are so impressive with their architecture. The construction of the road itself, which is popularly called Tuapse, began back in 1909. It was built out of necessity. Local merchants needed to establish trade, and using alternative roads was very expensive. In order to finance the creation of the road, a special joint stock company was created. Its shares were owned by the same merchants as well as local Cossacks and peasants. Goods began to be transported along the first section of the road already in 1915, but the route, passing through the Vasilovsky Bridge, began to work only a year later. The amazing bridge impresses people not only today. Reinforced concrete was used in the construction of the structure, which was a revolutionary solution at that time. It is noteworthy that bridges were built according to old plans. Projects of stone bridges with arches were used. The construction was led by specialists from Belgium and Germany, which is why they are also called German among the people. Of the 4 railway bridges, the highest is Vasilovsky. During construction, it was cast entirely from concrete, and the arches were created separately. Tourists rarely come here. Most often, here you can meet extreme climbers or travelers who like to visit unusual places. You need to look for this unique bridge in the Krasnodar territory. There is a Vasily farm there, in connection with which the bridge, which is located very close, got its name. Amazing discovery in Lake Michigan. Who hasn't heard of Stonehenge? Huge stones standing in a circle with a base that is not reinforced by anything. The purpose of this installation is still unknown, and a similar structure was found in 2007 at a depth of 12 meters in the Grand Traverse Bay, Lake Michigan, USA. Initially, the purpose of the expedition was to search for sunken ships using a new generation of sonars. Scientists found this strange structure underwater, and they did not expect at all that they would stumble upon such a historical monument, which most likely is more than 9,000 years old. Studies have revealed that many stones bear mysterious drawings that most of all resemble the figures of extinct animals. Several hypotheses have been put forward which of the peoples could erect such a structure, but so far none of them has been confirmed. Gold bars in Normandy. Excavations at a small Iron Age agricultural settlement in northwest France have led to a number of unexpected discoveries. Archaeological research on the banks of the Orne River in Normandy has been going on for several years. Scientists have established the boundaries of the place where the settlement was located, which existed in the Neolithic. One can definitely say people remained in the same place in the Bronze Age and in the Iron Age, and even when the legions of Rome came to Gaul. French archaeologists archaeologists have unearthed residential buildings and outbuildings which were previously dated to the 2nd century BC. Plant remains collected in storage pits showed that the inhabitants of the settlement grew barley, millet, einkorn wheat, and peas. Using the methods of archaeozoology, scientists determined the type of animal husbandry, mainly cattle, as well as goats, pigs, and sheep. In addition, in one section of the moat that encloses the settlement, they found the remains of carcasses of pigs and sheep without traces of butchering, which raises questions from experts. It could have been a sacrifice, but perhaps this was how the carcasses of sick animals were disposed of. Scientists also unearthed an Iron Age necropolis on the territory of the settlement, which was used for burials for almost 300 years, from about 540 to 250 BC. The main type of burial there is inhumation, but there are also several secondary cremation burials dating back to the 4th century BC. Apparently, for some time, the two burial practices coexisted. This usually indicates representatives of different religions, which often means different ethnic origins. The most amazing find of archaeologists was not even a necropolis. In the corner of the ditch that encloses the settlement, they found 29 ingots of gold, silver, and copper alloy. Preliminary dating 50-20 years BC. Similar ingots have already been found in Normandy, and according to some scholars, they were not intended for use in jewelry, but as means of payment, which is functionally close to coins made of precious metals. Mysterious pit at Stonehenge. Scientists from the universities of Kent and Birmingham have explored the deep layers of soil around the ancient megaliths of Stonehenge. They used electromagnetic ground scanning methods as well as a specially created program for semi-automatic data interpretation. As a result, researchers have found hundreds of large prehistoric pits and thousands more in the heart of Stonehenge, challenging our understanding of land use at the world's most heavily explored prehistoric site. Excavations of 6 large pits confirm the assumption of their anthropogenic origin. The largest, more than 4 meters wide and 2 meters deep, is dug into the chalk rock. It turns out that its volume is tens of cubic meters, and digging so much with stone tools in relatively hard rock is quite difficult. The pit is more than 10,000 years old, which means it was dug by early Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who settled Britain after the last ice age. And this is the oldest trace of land use discovered at Stonehenge. Mapping of other large pits shows that they are located on high ground to the east and west of Stonehenge. That is, the place that we used to associate it with ritual activities with druids and priests was actively visited by people almost immediately after they came to the island after the glacier melted. There are 7 millennia between the earliest and latest pits, whereas the stones of Stonehenge, according to the most daring estimates, are no more than 3.2 thousand years old. It turns out that the social context of the activities of the people who lived in those places changed radically over time, but they still continued to dig holes. It is not clear why. If you can still believe in pit traps in the Mesolithic, then similar structures in the Neolithic look strange. The density of game by this time should have fallen, and in the conditions of developed agriculture, driven hunting in pits does not look quite rational. Digging large holes before the advent of iron shovels is generally labor-intensive, especially in relatively dense chalk. This dog is 7,500 years old. Meet Muge, a dog that lived in Portugal 7,500 years ago. This one could well run in your yard, right? The skeleton of this dog was found in the Portuguese town of Muge in 1880 during the excavation of a large Mesolithic monument. Then the find did not attract attention. Scientists were more interested in the ancient people who lived in these territories. There was a burial ground in Muga, which included at least 110 human skeletons. Archaeologists managed to collect the largest European osteological collection of the Mesolithic era. Dog bones were found in a shell mound at a depth of 4 meters. The skeleton was put in a box and safely forgotten about it. The dog skeleton was rediscovered only 120 years later in a closet at the Lisbon Geological Museum. In 2010, the find was radiocarbon dated, given an age of 7,680–7,450 years ago. Since then, the dog from Muge has become an important exhibit in the museum's permanent exhibition. Experts experts determined that the skeleton belonged to a medium-sized adult dog. The height of the dog at the shoulders is about 50 centimeters. A more accurate age of the dog was established by making an X-ray of the skull from 2 to 6 years based on the closure of the pulp canals of the canines. More recently, a team of researchers, including renowned forensic reenactor Cesare Moraes, has taken on the task of restoring the appearance of the Muge dog. The dog's skull was subjected to a CT scan. A forensic technique commonly used to reconstruct human faces has been adapted to reconstruct a canine face. To recreate the original shape of the skull, its missing parts and soft tissues, the skull of a virtual donor was used, a modern dog that serves as a guide for reconstruction. The Belgian Shepherd Malinois male acted as such a donor. This specimen was chosen because its size and structure roughly corresponded to the skull of a Muge dog. What happened? Judge for yourself. As far as the authors of the work know, this is the first attempt to digitally reconstruct the appearance of an ancient dog that lived in the Mesolithic. Rich Phoenician necropolis. In southern Spain, archaeologists have discovered a Phoenician necropolis from the 4th or 5th century BC. The discovery surprised scientists because such structures had previously been found only in Sardinia and North Africa. According to the history blog, the discovery was made in the city of Osuna in southern Spain. Interestingly, the workers who were repairing the water supply were the first to stumble upon the ancient necropolis. They found the walls of limestone crypts, after which the work was temporarily stopped, and experts were invited to the site. The letters say that this is a unique find, and not only because the crypts are perfectly preserved. The fact is that such necropolises have never been found in Spain before. At the moment, archaeologists have unearthed 8 tombs with stairs and entrance atriums. Apparently, these were elite burials, as experts say, which have no analogues in the hinterland of Phoenician Spain. The only comparable necropolises were previously found only in the coastal area, which in ancient times was the Phoenician colony of Cadiz. But the city of Osuna is located quite far from the coast. It is located about 90 kilometers east of Seville. According to Delgado, at the beginning of the excavations, experts were sure that there were Roman structures underground. They would be much more in line with these places and history. Therefore, the researchers were very surprised to find tombs and hypogees, that is, underground walls of the Phoenician era. Ancient manuscript on silk. In the vicinity of the modern city of Changsha, located in the province of Hunan, in 1972-1974, archaeologists discovered and excavated the Mavangdui burial ground, which dates back to the early period of the Western Han Dynasty. The researchers found 3 burials there, which belonged to the Prince Hu owned the Dai inheritance in 185-165 BC, and also, probably, to his son and wife. The most striking of them was the burial of a woman whose remains were found in a mummified state. Scientists have found that she died at the age of approximately 54 from a heart attack. Together with her, archaeologists found numerous sets of clothes, 158 lacquer items such as furniture, cutlery, and toiletries, as well as silk fabrics and wooden figurines. In addition to things, the accompanying inventory included ancient texts on bamboo and wooden planks, as well as silk scrolls. Among them, in particular, were works devoted to ancient Chinese medicine and pharmaceuticals, contemplative, gymnastic, and sexual practices. Chinese scientists continued to study the rich collection of finds made in the Mavangdui burial ground. Thus, the latest research included more than 19,000 fragments of fabric and 1,700 lacquer and wooden items found in the burial of the wife of Prince Dai. According to Yu Yanzhao of the Hunan Province Museum, this work made it possible for the first time to identify delicate Chinese characters on silk fabrics, which indicate a high level of weaving during the early Han Dynasty. In addition, scientists found images of phoenixes that were embedded in patterns symbolizing longevity. Among other discoveries were dozens of found fragments of manuscripts on silk. Some of these texts, written in Chinese characters, have been identified as part of the 3rd volume of the ancient literary work Zhenjie. Giant funnel with primeval forest inside. A group of speleologists have discovered a giant accumulation of sinkholes in the Guangxi-Zhuan Autonomous Region of South China. 19 new sinkholes have been found, one of which stands out for its enormous size and lush vegetation, according to the team, which included scientists from China, Britain, and France. Located near Pingay village in Leh County, the sinkhole is 192 meters deep and 150 meters long and 306 meters wide, according to Xinhua News Agency. To understand the scale, imagine that the entire Manhattan block, along with skyscrapers, can easily fit into this hole, while it will not even be visible. Going down inside one of the funnels, the scientists saw a real hidden Garden of Eden with perfectly preserved trees reaching the height of a 12-story building, 40 meters, and smaller heat-loving vegetation. 3 large have also been preserved in its walls, which will help to better understand how such giant holes in the ground are formed in general. According to Zhang Yuanhai, senior engineer at the Institute of Archeology, China Geological Survey Administration, this stunning new ecosystem is part of a series of sinkholes that are connected by an underground river and cave system, making them the largest concentration ever discovered south of the Tropic of Cancer. Specialists will continue to study the funnel, which has become the 30th anniversary in the region. They suggest that plant and animal species new to modern mankind could have been preserved in the relict forest system. Sacred tunnels of the Assyrian Empire. During rescue excavations in the village of Bashbuk in southeastern Turkey, archaeologists discovered a system of ancient tunnels carved into the rock. Archaeological work began after the appeal of local residents to the authorities about the increasing activity of black archaeologists near the village. The entrance to the underground complex was found under a modern double-decker house. Archaeologists have dated the object to the 1st millennium BC, that is, the period of the Assyrian Empire in the region. Many drawings in the Assyrian style were found on the walls of the complex. Scientists believe that the object was religious and sacred, so some rock paintings depict scenes of the procession of Assyrian gods, such as Hated, the god of rain and storm, Sin, the moon goddess, Atargatis, the goddess of fertility, and others. An unusual feature of the records found in the language used here. The fact is that the inscriptions in the dungeons were made in Aramaic and not in Assyrian. However, this is explained by the fact that for the locals of that time, the Aramaic language was native. Thanks to the operational work of archaeologists, it was possible to partially decipher one of the cave inscriptions. It mentions the name of Mukin Abua, a Neo-Assyrian official from the reign of Adet Nirari III. Scholars suggest that this man was appointed as the ruler of the region, and the underground complex could have been used to house the locals. However, this is still only a working hypothesis. 17 skeletons on the grounds of a Welsh monastery. British archaeologists in Pembrokeshire, West Wales, have unearthed the remains of 17 skeletons in what they believe belonged to the monastery of the Holy Saviour before the Reformed King Henry VIII seized their property. The monastery existed from the mid-1200s until its collapse in 1536-1541. In the last years of the monastery's existence, Henry VIII, King of England and Wales, ordered the confiscation and sale of many church properties. This happened after he severed relations with the Catholic Church. The medieval monastery of the Holy Saviour, which was inhabited by Dominican monks, black monks, distinguished by the black color of their cloth, was no exception in this sense. According to Murphy, the crown sold all their property, but part of it, in particular, the burial ground that belonged to the monastery, remained untouched until the 17th century. We don't know for sure whether these remains belonged to monks, since a variety of people were often buried in monastic cemeteries. There were only shrouds on the buried, and the arms of all the skeletons were crossed on the chest. During the Middle Ages, approximately 500 to 1500 AD, monasteries were popular places for burial. Initially, the monastic cemeteries were intended only for the monks themselves, but quickly became popular places for the burial of the laity. The current excavations are taking place ahead of major construction in the area, with plans to build a 3-story grocery store with a bar and a rooftop terrace in the area. Forbidden text 2000 years old. In China, archaeologists have discovered several ancient bamboo plates with hieroglyphs, the deciphering of which has shed new light on the history of the Qin dynasty ban. Archaeologists have discovered 6 well-preserved bamboo plates covered with hieroglyphs. The deciphering of these texts sheds new light on the history and evolution of Chinese reading habits. Artifacts were found during excavations in the province of Hunan, located in central China. The work was carried out in the city of Yiyang. The relics themselves were found at the Duzishan historical site. They are ancient pieces of paper. According to experts, the age of the artifacts is approximately 2,000 years. They date back to the early period of the Western Han Dynasty. The excavations were carried out in 2013. However, it is only now that Zhang Chunlong, the head of the excavation team, has made public the results of a study of the findings made at that time. According to him, there are unusual records on 6 bamboo plates. In fact, this is the correspondence of people who discuss offering books among themselves. Archaeologists believe that the texts discuss the lifting of the ban on the private collection of books. For the first time, such a ban was introduced during the reign of the Qin dynasty. As evidenced by these bamboo plates, after the ban was lifted, borrowing, donating, and collecting books became a social trend. Later, both the royal family and local governments accumulated an unprecedentedly rich collection of books. During the reign of the Western Han Dynasty, people began to read more books, libraries began to appear. The secret of Buddhist monks. Buddhism is one of the most ancient religions. There are many artifacts thanks to which we can restore the history of this religion, its values and features. One of such artifacts is the collection of texts of the Tripitaka Koreana. It contains all the knowledge about Buddhism that has accumulated over decades. These are not copies of already existing texts. This is the original, which gives a complete picture of knowledge about Buddhism. On the Korean peninsula, there is a Haeinsa monastery, which is very important for the entire Asian culture. This place is remarkable not only for its beauty and tranquility that people find here, but also for the fact that completely unique texts are stored here. This collection has been accumulating for several centuries. All the canons of Buddhism are described here, and there is simply no other such complete collection. All these texts are stored on clay tablets. There are more than 80,000 of them. Sometimes, because of this, the collection of texts is called the 80,000 Tripitaka. All these texts are divided into volumes, of which there are more than 6,000. The height of each such tablet is 25 centimeters, and the width is about 70. It can be said that all the wisdom of ancient people is stored in these texts, and it took a long time to study this heritage. Now the tablets are carefully guarded, but tourists have the opportunity to see these texts live. The temple in which the texts are stored is open to travelers. Unfortunately, the collection of texts was almost completely destroyed during the invasion of the Mongols. All the tablets were badly damaged, but they were such an important part of the culture that the ruling dynasty commissioned the restoration of all records. Such painstaking and accurate work took more than 10 years. In the end, all texts were restored. They tried to make the plates as similar as possible to those that were lost. For example, the first tablets were made from white birch and cherry trees, and the same types of wood were used in the restoration. In addition, for the sake of preserving the texts, the tablets were framed, and this worked almost 1,000 years after these tablets were made. They're in excellent condition, and the text on them can be read without problems. The tablets were covered with poisonous varnish so that insects would not spoil them. Traces of Denisovans in a cave in northern Laos. In Laos, in the Tamgo Kaok 2 cave in the Annamite Mountains, a 130,000-year-old tooth was found, which, as it turned out, belonged to a representative of the Denisovans, a subspecies of ancient people whose traces were previously found in the Denisova cave in Altai and in China. The found tooth, molar, belonged to a girl aged 3.5 to 8 years. The age of the find was determined by sedimentary rocks in the cave and amounted to 161,000 years. The close morphological similarity to the Xiahe specimen from China indicates that they belong to the same taxon, and that Tamgu Hao too most likely represents a Denisovan. The anthropological material of a Denisovan in Southeast Asia was found for the first time. The authors of the publication attributed the rarity of the find to the peculiarities of the region's climate. Also in the cave were found teeth of large mammals, including Stegodon, an ancient proboscis animal, a relative of the mammoth, elephant, and rhinoceros. For the first time, traces of Denisovans were discovered in Altai in the Denisova cave in 2010. Then their genome was deciphered. After scientists found a jawbone in 2019 on the Tibetan plateau, proving that part of the species also lived in China. According to modern concepts, Africa is considered the ancestral home of mankind, but there is still no consensus on how this process went. A number of scientists believe that there were 3 expansions of human ancestors from Africa to Eurasia. The early ancestor Homo, about 1.9 million years ago, the ancestors of Neanderthals and Denisovans, about 700,000 years ago, and people of the modern type, about 50,000 years ago. According to archaeological data, Denisovan man, an independent subspecies of ancient people, appeared in Altai after a powerful wave of migration from the Middle East about 300,000 years ago. Its traces were found in the Denisova cave, from which it got its name. The mysterious tomb of Genghis Khan. Death overtook the great Mongol commander in 1227 during the Crusade, and for many years, scientists and researchers have been wondering where the founder of the Mongol Empire was buried. There are legends that the body of Genghis Khan was returned to his homeland and buried along with a huge amount of valuables. Therefore, it has been a main goal for researchers, scientists, and ordinary treasure lovers for centuries. It is believed that after death, for the sake of the beloved Khan, many people were killed. All passers-by who came across on the way to the burial place were executed by soldiers. After the huge grave was dug by the slaves, they were also killed. And then they killed the soldiers who killed the slaves. Although there is a version that the soldiers independently and voluntarily committed suicide in order to serve Genghis Khan even after death. Further versions of the legend about the burial of the commander diverge. The first of them says that the course of the river was changed, which to this day hides the grave. The second suggests that after the burial, a herd of horses was released, which trampled all traces of the excavated earth. Today, the Mongols still appreciate and revere Genghis Khan. The country doesn't look for his burial because they believe that it is a great sin to violate the will of the founder of the Mongol Empire to be secretly buried. Therefore, researchers from other countries can only build theories and conjectures, explore the area on their own or with the help of drones, but neither the state nor the residents will allow historical excavations. Famous nations with an unknown future. On the pages of historical books and textbooks, one can meet such people as Polovtsi, Aztecs, or Phoenicians, and this is not surprising because all of them, to one degree or another, left their mark. However, today few people are interested in what became of them. Did they disappear, or do their descendants still inhabit the planet? And I'll start with the very Aztecs, whose temples have survived to this day. Many people remember these people for their rituals, but for some reason, few people pay attention to their cultural development. But they highly valued poetry and theatrical performances in which musicians and acrobats participated. In addition, they were engaged in sculpting sculptures and dishes, as well as carving wood. What happened to them? In the 16th century, the Spaniards arrived on their territory and found the city of Mexico City. It is easy to guess that today the descendants of the Aztecs are the Mexicans who are trying to preserve the culture of the people who followed the hands of the Spanish conquerors. But if these people lived already in our time, then the Mayan civilization appeared even before our era. These people were remembered for achievements in the fields of mathematics and astronomy, and their exact calendar more than once made of us. Perhaps many more discoveries would have awaited them ahead if it were not for the Spaniards again, who brought with them many diseases unknown to the Indians. Today in Mexico and Central America, you can find about 5 million people who speak Mayan sign languages. All of them united in communities and went to live in villages where they are engaged in agriculture and selling their products. The Phoenicians were outstanding people because it was their language that formed the basis of many modern alphabetic systems. It was among them that there were prominent merchants and sailors, as well as glass and ceramics craftsmen. But just acquired wealth did not provide their state protection. So back in the 4th century BC, the Phoenicians disappeared, and other countries, such as Lebanon and Syria, have settled on their territory today. Remember how the Gauls were shown in the Asterix and Obelix movie series? So this Celtic tribe was, indeed, considered barbarians, although in fact they cannot be called savages. Their rather complex society revered the Druids and advocated gender equality. And yet, the Celts were one of the first among Europeans to wear pants. Already in the 1st century BC, most of the Celtic people sunk into oblivion. Only the British part remained, living in the territories of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Despite the fact that these people have ceased to exist fully, their culture continues to live and is actively sung by people from all over the world at various annual festivals. Surely everyone has heard about the Incas, who lived in the 12th century in the territory from Chile to Ecuador. But few people know that poverty and unemployment were not allowed in this empire, which they fought with the motto, "Do not lie, do not steal, do not be lazy." What is it about these people? The creation of a lunar calendar, as well as a method of transmitting secret information using quipu, a complex interlacing of knots and ropes. And once again, a promising civilization fell due to the Spaniards brought a smallpox epidemic to their land. It is known that the Palavci were nomads who did not try to create their own state, but simply moved from the territory of Central Asia. However, it is unlikely that many have heard the opinion that the representatives of these people like blue-eyed blondes with mongoloid features. In the 13th century, the Palavci ceased to exist, merging with other people and adopting their way of life. Well, I will finish with the Bulgars, known today as the Bulgarians. Unlike the Palavci, they founded their state in the 7th century. After the adoption of religion, these people became close to the Slavic culture so much that even the oppression of the Ottoman Empire did not win them over to the side of the Turks in 5 centuries. True, the independent country, known to everyone today, Bulgaria, appeared only at the beginning of the 20th century. Ancient quarry in China. China holds many mysteries. Among them are not only ancient burials of people with fair skin, but also pyramids buried under a layer of earth. The size of ancient megaliths, as well as traces of processing on their surface, conspiracy theorists believe that their origin is the merit of an ancient people with high-tech knowledge, as well as extraterrestrial technologies and living on the territory of ancient China. There is a possibility that it was these people who built the Chinese pyramids, and at the same time, the first burials of fair-haired giants of the Caucasoid race appeared. According to historians, the last development of limestone in this quarry was carried out in the 15th century. The reason for stopping work and stopping the extraction of the mineral are not known to science. Limestone is quite simply processed, so the extraction was carried out with the help of improvised means, as evidenced by chaotic scratches on the walls. It is strange that the quarry has survived to our time and has not suffered from erosion. Some researchers believe that the quarry was developed long before the advent of our era, and the stone blocks were buried under a layer of clay during the cataclysms that occurred. And conspiracy theorists suggest that this place was a navigation complex, which allowed you to navigate in space, and the largest megalith served as an infrasound antenna. Whoever was the creator of these monuments, one thing can be said with certainty: it were great people, or maybe something more than just the people, thanks to which amazing buildings and high-tech equipment are still found in China. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. Perhaps the most popular lost treasure story in North America is that of the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. Mount Superstition, located near Phoenix, Arizona, is a purported location for this lost treasure. In 1840, the Mexican Peralta family discovered a rich gold mine. Their last gold mining expedition to Mexico took place in 1848. According to legend, this expedition was attacked by the Apaches, and all members of the family were killed, except for 2 people from the Peralta family who managed to escape to Mexico. The area where the expedition that killed people passed is known as the Land of Massacre. Few people knew the exact location of the gold mine. The number of workers on it was limited. Many maps have survived over the years only to be lost forever. The people who claimed to have found the location of the Peralta mine could not return from there, or some misfortune befell them before they reached the legendary mine. The legend of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine is that a German immigrant named Jacob Walter discovered the famous Peralta mine. Walter and his partner Jacob Weiser worked hard at the mine and managed to hide some of the gold somewhere in the mountains. Weiser was killed, most likely by Apaches or Wolves himself. Wolves moved to Phoenix due to failing health and died in 1891. He described the location of the mine to a neighbor who took care of him until his death, but it was not possible to find the gold mine of the missing Dutchman. Lost Golden City. Archaeologists made a sensational discovery. They managed to discover the long-lost Golden City, which was named after the sun deity Aten Rising. This city is considered the largest of all that scientists have ever found in Egypt. Archaeologists literally caught their luck by the tail, since earlier about 60 missions were sent to search for this city, but they all ended in nothing. Excavations were carried out between the temples of Ramses III and Amenhotep III last fall, and when archaeologists saw the first signs of a brick structure, they decided that they had discovered the burial temple of Tutankhamun. But upon further excavation, they discovered zigzag walls, buildings, and rooms. Seeing all this, they realized that they had discovered not a burial temple at all, but a whole city. For 7 months, archaeologists worked tirelessly, and during this time, they were able to discover and excavate several residential quarters and workshops, the administrative district and premises in which food was made and stored. They also found craft workshops in which they made decorations for temples and amulets. In general, they found a lot of evidence that life was in full swing here, discovered vessels, dried meat, and jugs with the remnants of wine that confirmed this. Scientists believe that the foundation of the city took place during the reign of Amenhotep III. Scientists have already announced that it is the largest of the cities found, dating back to the Golden Age, which is approximately 3,000 years old. For them, this is a kind of Aladdin's cave, since they do not know exactly how much more they can make sensational finds there. Their level is unpredictable. They hope to find ancient writings, which will describe in detail all the information they are interested in. And since the excavation continues, it is likely that sooner or later they will find them. Find in the ancient head of the Buddha. It is not uncommon for treasure hunters to find a valuable find and then discover that it contains no less or even more valuable artifact. The ancient head of the Buddha can be attributed to such a find, and this head is made of wood, and its age is estimated at 645 years. It is surprising that for as long as 6 centuries, none of the previous owners was able to find the cache, which was discussed by skilled craftsmen. And only in 2016, art critics from Australia who examined the head before the auction managed to notice a cavity, and in it a very curious and valuable find. This find turned out to be a large banknote, and its size in fact corresponded to an A4 sheet. Upon careful examination of the banknote, it was found that it was issued in 1371, just during the reign of the first emperor of the Ming dynasty, Zhou Yuanzhang. The 1 guan banknote was equivalent to 1,000 copper coins or 1 ounce of pure silver, 28 grams. By the way, all this information was taken from the bill itself. In addition, an inscription was found here, which said that for forgery of banknotes, the person convicted of this was facing the death penalty by beheading. It is worth noting that this find became a major event in the world of archaeology, since the banknote is in fact the very first copy of paper money in history. In Europe, paper money began to appear only 300 years later in the 17th century. At least earlier specimens have not yet been found. So, due to the attentiveness of art critics, one auction lot turned into 2 different lots. Sleeping woman. The art of sculpture flourished in Malta. Archaeologists in a huge number find here ancient Venuses, characteristic of the entire world of the Paleolithic era. But there are other works here, much more skillful. Of course, they were all religious in nature and were dedicated to the goddess. They are usually small. Of the large temple sculptures, only one has survived. The most famous piece of ancient Maltese art is a small 12 centimeters figurine of a sleeping woman. Pay attention to the abundance of details, elegance of lines and shapes, and it was created 2 millennia before the first sill-stepped pyramid of Djoser in the Valley of the Falcons. Let's talk now about the religion of ancient Malta. The Foremother stood at the head of the pantheon of gods. Her cult sometimes became monotheic, and the society itself was a matriarchy. So one of the later temples was a necropolis for 7,000 deceased women. No remains of the men were found. The Foremother personified the beginning, prosperity. Therefore, serving her was directly related to the cult of abundance, namely the cult of food. They ate a lot, ate greedily, brought food to the temples, filled up the altars with it. The main occupation of the islanders was agriculture. Cutlery, pie on the feet. Imagine a creature of gigantic size. Its barrel-shaped belly literally drags along the floor, and its head is almost invisible against the background of its powerful body. 270 million years ago, nature was just beginning to sculpt full-fledged vertebrates on land. As you know, the first pancakes are always lumpy, and our hero, if not a pancake, then certainly a pie on his paws. The dimensions of this giant are up to 6 meters in length, up to 2 tons in weight. In the Permian period, Cutleryncus was the largest land creature. You ask, what about dinosaurs? And dinosaurs at the time of Cutleryncus were not even in sight. The animal defended itself from the Permian predators by 2 things. First, by giant claws that reached 5-8 centimeters in length. Secondly, the gigantic size. To hunt, our hero was as unrealistic as modern elephants or hippos. Cutlerynus are not a species but a whole genus of giant lizardmen. Some of them reached only 3 meters, some were twice as large, but it was difficult to hunt both those and others because of their gigantic size. In general, our body-positive friend occupied a similar niche, only not in Africa, but on the territory of modern America. There he peacefully nibbled grass along the banks of reservoirs, swam in lakes, conquered predators, and generally lived in a high. So the first attempts of evolution to do something vertebrate, terrestrial, and large came out not painfully functional. Why is a Cutleryncus such a large body? Why such powerful paws? And most importantly, why such a small head? After all, such proportions did not give any advantage. But despite this, the beast became the biggest animal of its period. The oldest meteorite from the Sahara. Experts have studied the EC002 meteorite, discovered last year in the Sahara Desert. This stone weighs about 32 kilograms and is estimated to be 4.6 billion years old. It has been identified as a piece of a protoplanet that formed before Earth. Achondrites are a fairly common type of meteorite, accounting for about 8% of all found. These are stone meteorites without rounded inclusions, chondrules. They are similar in composition and structure to terrestrial basalts. All achondrites, to one degree or another, underwent melting, which destroyed the chondrules. A team of scientists determined that this 32-kilogram piece of rock was once liquid lava, then cooled and solidified for 100,000 years and eventually came to our planet. Until now, no asteroids with similar properties have been found. It is likely that the protoplanet from which it originated had since disappeared, becoming part of larger bodies or just collapsing. EC002 is composed primarily of volcanic rocks rich in sodium, iron, and magnesium. The mystery of the book hat from the sunken ship. The strange object, resembling a head of cabbage, lifted from the board of the Archangel Raphael in 2020, is nothing more than a book. The most valuable find is an impressive volume that has survived almost completely, but it has yet to be determined what kind of publication it is. The pages, heavily contaminated with lard, grease, and tar, swollen from seawater, have not yet given up their secrets. The book has survived in its entirety. There are more than 1,000 pages in it. The paper fibers have swollen, the book is fully open because of this. It of course will require a very careful and thoughtful approach to restoration. The book has a leather cover. Under the cover, there is a backing, most likely made of wood veneer. All this will have to somehow be dried separately, disassembled, and separately dealt with the book block. The book will certainly be readable. Ancient books were recognized as authentic. The historical document, the Lasava book, was found to be fake according to the results of the analysis of linguistics. That is, during the study of old documents, a lot of attention is paid to the writing language and spelling rules that guided our ancestors. But experts were able to prove the authenticity of the books about Jesus not only due to this. They found books were in the spotlight in 2008. It was then that they first fell into the hands of scholars and posed a difficult question before them. Are these apparently ancient texts actually the same age as Christ? Or is it just another fake created by a particularly zealous enthusiast or fraudster? As shown by isotopic analysis, the books were created from metal plates, similar to another long-found book, whose age is also approaching 2,000 years. Similar traces of corrosion, as well as an almost identical composition of the alloy, which demonstrates the work of not one master, but somewhere in the same period of time, since the technology of metal production has changed over the centuries. In addition, some pages of a kind of Bible contain very unusual information. So, the father of Jesus, that is God, according to what was written, embodied both male and female sex at the same time. Also, the teaching of Christ was called not a new religion, but on the contrary, ancient Hebrew. However, researchers cannot yet reliably say what this means. Underwater settlement over 6,000 years old. Underwater archaeologists from Croatia have discovered a Neolithic settlement that existed more than 6,000 years ago in the region of the island of Corcylla in the south of the country. Mate Perica of the University of Zadar, together with Croatian archaeologists, while studying satellite images of the coastline, discovered a large and deep area on the seabed protruding from the eastern coast of the island of Corcylla. Scientists decided to conduct an underwater survey of this site and identified a supposed Neolithic settlement that existed around 4500 BC. Archaeologists believe that this settlement was built on a small piece of land that used to be connected to the main island by a narrow passage. They managed to find the ruins of the stone walls that surrounded the village, as well as pottery, flint knives, and some other household items used by the residents. The location of the settlement seems to be very unusual. Scientists noted that they were not aware of such finds in this region, and the main discoveries of the Neolithic era, as a rule, were made during excavations in caves. In their opinion, the neighboring islands protect the area from large sea waves, which allowed the settlement to avoid natural destruction. $22 billion cash. The Indian temple of Padmanabha Swami gained worldwide fame in July 2011, when caches with countless treasures were uncovered in its basements, totaling more than $20 billion. These findings can only be compared with the values of the tombs of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun discovered in 1922. The temple was built back in 1750. The history of the appearance of treasures in the temple is rooted in the culture and customs of ancient India, when the Rajas, upon accession to the throne, gave the ancient sanctuary as much gold as their own weight. At all times, merchants who visited the city made generous offerings to the deity of Padmanabha Swami temple in order not only to receive a blessing for successful trade from higher powers, but also to enlist the favor of the local authorities. For centuries, riches have been accumulating in the temple, which the believers brought as gifts. The priests of the temple collected all these gifts and took them to storage in 6 underground caches. In 6 chambers, 2 of which were sealed about 130 years ago, gold bars with a total weight of 1 ton and bags of precious stones, rubies, sapphires, and diamonds were found. It is noted that among the most amazing items in the hiding places were a full-size throne made of pure gold, studded with diamonds and other precious stones, 536 kilograms of gold and silver coins, a golden sheaf weighing more than 500 kilograms, dishes and crowns inlaid with rubies, golden figurines, and a gold chain 5.5 meters and weighing 36 kilograms, and also a golden statue of Vishnu 1.2 meters high. Ring of the Death. Treasure hunters in Wales have unearthed 9 valuable medieval artifacts in the kingdoms of Powys and Wales. One of the most valuable finds was a gold ring found in Powys with the inscription Memento Mori, remember death, and a skull. In addition, they found gold and silver coins and a medieval double hook clasp. All values belong, according to historians, to the Welsh nobility and were made in the period from the 9th to the 17th century. The treasure hunters donated their finds to the National Museum of Wales. As the authorities of Wales said, it will become part of the national treasury. This is an early example of the late Tudor early Stuart death ring, said Dr. Mark Randknapp, National Museum's Deputy Director for Collections and Research. The popularity of these rings was associated with the high mortality rate in that era. Their main idea was to remind of the transience and futility of life. These findings allowed us to learn more about the attitude towards death in that period. Finds also included a medieval silver ring fibula, Tudor coins, and a silver hook clasp. The oldest map of Europe. A Bronze Age stone slab found by archaeologists in France in 1900 has been re-examined by experts. And new analyses show that the drawings in stone are the first ever map of Europe. According to French scholars, the pattern was made 4,000 years ago and depicts the area of Western Brittany. According to scientists, the stone contains elements that would be logical to find on a prehistoric map. In particular, a repetitive image of parallel lines denoting a similarity of a coordinate grid on the map. After analyzing the surface of the map, scientists assumed that it was made in 3 dimensions, taking into account the height. In their opinion, using the 3rd dimension, ancient topographers designated the heights in the valley of the Odet River. Several lines adjoining it seem to indicate the tributaries of the river. The stone, measuring 1.8 by 1.5 meters, probably depicts a territory that at the beginning of the Bronze Age was under the rule of a single ruler. According to scientists, perhaps it symbolizes the alienation of a given territory from one leader to another. And in order not to miss a new video about the ancient world, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. Thanks for your views. Bye everyone!